Welcome to Andy and Ari On3, presented by Wendy's. We have an Ari this time. We got to talk about Georgia Notre Dame, and we have to talk about the college football playoff semifinals, which are set now. Notre Dame against Penn State in the Orange Bowl, Texas against Ohio State in the Cotton Bowl. Ari, you and I will both be at the Cotton Bowl. I will be at the Orange Bowl. Very excited about both these games. This is a time for you to pound your chest a little bit, Mr. Wasserman, because you had Notre Dame not only going this far, but going to the final. And Vegas says that they think Notre Dame's going to go to the final.
Well, first, let me apologize to you about tonight. When I see you all alone, it kills me. I was watching the stream in an Uber, and I was just like, God, man.
Did I do okay?
You did great, and I'm sorry, and I owe you one.
I'm no JD Piquel, but we're working on it.
Yeah, well, you had some reps last year. Like the thing about the game tonight is that I'm wrong all the time, right? So when I'm right, I don't know that victory lap feels good.
Oh, we've got tweets. I think this could feel good. I've seen you take a lot of abuse, and I've actually been the source of a lot of the abuse with the Kalen DeBoer column. So I feel like it's my duty. I'll do what Riley Leonard did in the post-game press conference with Marcus Freeman, where Marcus Freeman's like, oh, that little punt call, that little, hard count deal where we run everybody off and run everybody on. Just a little old thing. And Riley Leonard's like, no. He made that up 2 days ago, changed everything, and it worked because of the way he changed it. And I'm going to do that for you today, Ari. We've got the tweets. Producer River, let's see him. Oh, ND beating Georgia, LOL. What else we got? I can see ND beating IU, but come on, they're not beating Georgia. They're not that good. That's from Joe. Come on. Notre Dame is going to lose in the first round to Indiana. Book it. I think we got one more, right?
There's a million of them.
No, that's it. There's a bunch of them.
Yeah. I can't believe it actually happened, though. In theory, it is and
it wasn't really that close.
It looked like for the first half that Georgia was going to win to me. I don't know about you, but once they turned it over before halftime and Notre Dame scored, that was the oh crap moment. So here's the deal. I think that it's just fair to say that none of us really know anything, right? Sometimes
I think that's fair.
You think you know something and you don't. And I happen to be right this time. But the thing that I thought was apparent and the most important thing about these results is that hopefully when we go into next year, and I'm not holding my breath, that we can all just agree on one thing. That our preconceived notions of who is good and who is great based on past circumstance and previous notions are worthless. And the thing is that Notre Dame did lose to NIU this year. Notre Dame did not look like a team that was going to be able to beat Georgia for a large portion of the year. But for a large portion of the year, it looked really good. And for a large portion of the year, Georgia did not look very good. And they finished the season with the number one strength of schedule, and they navigated that strength of schedule beautifully, right? To go 10-2 the way that they did, if the Ole Miss game were closer, I would say it's about as good as you could possibly do. So for them to be the SEC champ and to be ranked where they were, I thought was justified. But I think that we watch enough football, Andy, over the course of a year and a course of our careers to be able to diagnose which teams are truly elite. And, Georgia had some good defensive stretches this year, but I don't really know where the flash was of that's it. That's the team. You know what I mean?
First half of the Texas game in Austin. That's really it. That's the only time it looked like Georgia's defense was unstoppable. Other time, the first half of the Alabama game, for goodness sakes, was a giant red flag.
Right. And it is even interesting in the games where teams, win big. It's like Ohio State lost to Oregon earlier in the year. Ohio State beat Penn State. Texas lost to Georgia twice. And the teams that lost are the ones advancing. So it's just a reminder that the college football season is a living, evolving organism. And because you
Somebody
saw
really
happen,
smart said that earlier
you?
today. Yeah.
I'm a plagiarist.
Oh, both our names are on the show. It's all community property.
Yeah. Take it. I'm gonna take it for myself. And it's like the random fan who's not listening to this is never going to adapt the way they behave. But like they lost to NIU is not analysis. It's a statement. Okay. So we knew what Notre Dame had on its roster. And frankly speaking, they lost a lot of talent, like to injury this year. This isn't even
five starters lost to season-ending injuries, and not just like Charles Jagasa, who was the next guy in line in the left tackle factory that Notre Dame runs. Like he was next man up in that. Lost him in camp. Benjamin Morrison, All-America cornerback, lost him. Riley Mills, their best defensive tackle, lost him at the end of the Indiana game. Like, and this is I made this point in the earlier video, but I want to hammer this home. Brian Kelly era Notre Dame could not absorb losses like that. They had a very good starting 22, but when they lost players, they were not capable of competing against the best teams in the sport. This team has lost as much as anybody has lost this season. And you just saw them go toe-to-toe with the program that has been the most talented in the sport for the past 5 years.
Mm-hmm.
And
I think that this game is about Georgia coming back down to earth a little bit, but I also think that this game, Andy, is about Notre Dame increasing, right? And
yes,
I think that there is going to be a lot of off-season discussion between the two of us about where the sport, lands in the talent discrepancy department and how flat the curve is and where that curve occurs. Because on one hand, and I got a little carried away today, but like I think this year's Ohio State team might be the last team like that ever, right?
We keep saying that, but that team also could lose to Texas or could lose to whoever they face next.
They haven't won anything yet. I just mean from a roster standpoint, it might be the last time a team has that many good players at the same time.
Where you can't see the weakness in the roster. Yeah, and Georgia had clear weaknesses.
And even that team that's constructed that way had a glaring offensive line weakness during the year. So once all their players that should be in the NFL are in the NFL next year, and they are returning a few important pieces, but like there's not going to be a team that has that many NFL players, I think, playing at every spot again. Mm-hmm. So like that's why I have a hard time, with that side of the bracket, because it's like, okay, well, they woke up and they're built that way, but like everybody else was deficient. Like Notre Dame had deficiencies, they had injuries. Like the thing with the Georgia situation tonight too, it's just like I'm seeing a lot of like, Carson Beck was out, so that's the reason Notre Dame won.
I don't think Carson Beck would have won them that game. Like I don't think Gunnar Stockton played poorly.
I don't know that that's true. And I don't know that I saw much from Georgia's offense the entire season to think that this was surprising, right? Like this is what we saw.
Right. They had to throw more than they ran because they couldn't run the ball the way they have been able to. And they weren't particularly great at throwing it either because they didn't have the dynamic targets that they've had in the past. I mean,
and I think the thing that's interesting, Andy, about this semifinal is you have a lot of coaches who could be on the verge of breaking through and doing something that they haven't done. And even Dan Lanning, to a certain extent, who, is probably having a rough day today, did beat Ohio State during the regular season. And I thought that he had a better season than he's ever had. James Franklin is on the verge of doing something that they haven't. No, they already have. They're in the semifinals, right?
They already have. Marcus Freeman hasn't done this. Notre Dame has been in the Final Four, but Marcus Freeman hasn't. Steve Sarkisian got in the Final Four last year, can take the next step. Like,
no matter who wins, whoever wins the national championship is going to be a first-time coach that joins that guard, which I think is interesting. So, I do think that, making this show about like victory laps is not right, because like Marcus Freeman just did something for Notre Dame that they have not done in 3 decades. And it's like there was a moment in time this year where we were having real discussions about, can Notre Dame succeed under Marcus Freeman if they can't avoid being upset by bad teams? Because this is the 3rd time it's happened now. And like now they're in the college football playoff semifinal beating Georgia. and playing Penn State in a game that they're going to be favored in, probably. Like, are they going to the national title game? Like, this is where we're at. Yeah. So, like, for me, I feel like we had this long season of ups and downs and Cinderellas and playoff debate and all this stuff. And like at the end of the road, you have 4 teams in the finals that were all ranked in the top 8 in the preseason AP poll. So I think that like we kind of arrived back to where we started. And like everyone's like, the polls in the beginning of the year are meaningless. And they are. But we know how to analyze rosters and which players are good and how to do the reporters that vote on this aren't stupid. Like we know.
Yeah, none of these are a surprise. They were all like top 7 preseason teams, right?
I think Notre Dame was 7 or 8 in the AP poll, and that was the lowest ranked team, and Penn State was higher, I think. So, you do have a new look to it, like Penn State and Notre Dame. Or the new look. The only team that's kind of been there consistently for the last 10 years is Ohio State, because Texas is still fairly new. They broke through last year, but they're back. And again, you have 4 coaches with a lot to prove, but like also too, it's like, did James Franklin completely redeem himself? I don't know. We'll see. Like the big game, James Franklin is going to be put to the test in their next game more than ever. But Sarkisian looks like the guy at Texas for a long period of time. And like Ryan Day probably just coached himself out of like coaching hell the last few weeks. So what if he wins the national championship? Then all of a sudden, you go from almost people wanting you fired to winning a national. It's a very strange year, but I actually like don't want to go into the week of the semifinal without saying like I had a blast with this. Like I know there were blowouts, but it was fun.
It's interesting, right? Like when the teams actually play the games on the field instead of we just assume. Because remember, Oregon, Georgia, Texas, and Penn State. That would have been your Final Four with the old format. Notre Dame wouldn't be in it. Ohio State wouldn't be in it.
Where I've stood on the preservation of the regular season and stuff, but I was listening to a podcast, and I can't put my finger on who it was, made this point, and I never thought about it this way. And I think it's important, and it's a new way of looking at it that kind of, I was like, that's a really good point. And the point was that because the playoff is expanded this year, Indiana's story meant something. Arizona State's story meant something. Like in the past, we have had Cinderella seasons of teams that have gone on to do good things in the regular season, but you kind of knew in the back of your head that they weren't going to be a part of it. But like the Cam Scattaboo experience this year was magnified exponentially by their participation in this tournament. I think Kurt Cignetti's...
They're having a chance to get into the tournament for the last month of the season.
Right. So it's like, even though the season is going to hash itself out, like I think for the most part, and if Arizona State would have won, maybe this would be different. I think 9 or 8 out of 10 times we run this tournament, you're probably going to have 4 teams at the end that were in the top 8 of the AP preseason poll. Like I think this is going to be the typical. But even if it's 2 out of 10 years where an Arizona State makes it, or a Boise makes a run, or an Indiana makes a run, the fact that they were able, for the first time in the sport's history, to not only play meaningful games that people are excited about, like you actually know that they get to participate in it. And like, I was so fixated all the time about who deserves to be in and who, how perfect everybody had to be all the time. And like, I think I'm like starting to come around on the idea that like, it's not just about perfection. It's about doing enough while also not having to be perfect. That way we can, get to a place where we settle it on the field.
As the rosters flatten, and I do think we've talked about this a lot. The first round showed they haven't flattened as much as maybe we thought, but they have flattened. Like there's a reason Georgia is not as deep as it was, and Notre Dame is more deep than it was. And it's not just that Marcus Freeman is the coach instead of Brian Kelly. So perfection is going to be almost impossible to attain going forward. Maybe just let them play. And that's what we're doing now.
And here's the mixed feeling I do have, Andy, because I had like an existential. So I don't know if you know this, but I was freaking out about getting to the airport on time this morning. And I ended up getting there like 3 hours early because everything went perfectly. Because of course it did. So I wrote.
We're not going to tell the people why the show ended as abruptly as it did in the morning, are we?
You can if you want.
It wasn't because you had to go to the airport. He had to go somewhere, but not to the airport.
Yeah, no, I was. The court had to grant me a short bathroom break in that moment.
As we learned a few minutes ago, I could have vamped for a few minutes, but I did want to get you to your plane on time as well.
But so anyway, I ended up writing an extra column about Oregon this morning. Okay. And I was like really thinking it through. And I don't know if this is tonight or another time, but like I think that Oregon fans, though disappointed, should be really hopeful. And I think that they are in a really good place with the right coach. But I was actually thinking more about it, and I didn't write about this, but like you realize that Oregon probably just would have won the national title if this happened last year, right? Like they are still the second best team in my opinion.
If not having to play Ohio State, like, I don't know, like, because I'm trying to think of how that would have worked, how the seeding would work. I actually think this one would have been really complained about in the 14 format because it would have been rematches of the Big Ten and SEC championships in the semis. But Oregon probably beats Penn State in the rematch, we think.
You want to hear?
I think this Oregon team would have beaten Georgia or Texas, but I don't know.
Here's my tinfoil hat theory. It's Thursday, but it's usually on Tuesday. Yeah. Tinfoil hat Tuesday on Thursday. I would bet if I could like go into an alternate universe and put real money on this, that they would have ranked them differently if they knew there were only 4 teams. Like, I don't think that's what the rankings would have been if they were.
Who would have been? Who else would have gotten in? Was Penn State out?
You know who I think would probably be in? I think Notre Dame probably would have gotten in.
Over Penn State?
I think that they would have probably gotten in over Penn State. Let me go look at the college football playoff final rankings real quick.
I believe Penn State was 4 and Notre Dame was 5. So I think that would make sense.
Yeah, Notre Dame would have gotten in at 4, I think. And then it would have been Oregon, Notre Dame, Georgia, and Texas, probably. And I don't have proof of that, but Penn State would have 2. Oh, Penn State had 2
Would
losses.
Oregon have beaten Notre Dame?
It's not guaranteed. Like, listen, we don't know.
It would have been a game, for sure.
It would have been a game. Yeah. But, like, here's what I do know. And you can come along with me on this journey or not. I made a tweet today and people went absolutely banana land. And I want to ask you if you agree with me.
Okay.
And this isn't about achievement. This is about one individual game. Okay.
Right.
Did the one individual game performance that you saw out of Ohio State in the Rose Bowl on Wednesday stack up with, in terms of how good they are, with 19 LSU and 20 Alabama and either of the subsequent Georgia teams? Or do you think that's insane to think?
It looked a lot like that.
Those teams didn't lose. So it's not about season achievements, but when it comes to the buzzsaw that Oregon ran into, I think that it was akin to that. Okay. So to me, Ohio State is the only team this year that has put forth a performance that you could make that comparison to. Whether or not you want to go along with me on that is your prerogative. But Ohio State, with Jeremiah Smith, their defensive line, Caleb Downs, I don't need to list out the whole roster. You get it. Is like if Ryan Day loses a game with that team playing like that, then you can reopen the what the hell's going on there discussion. As far as I'm concerned, they are that good.
Even against Texas,
I don't think Texas has nearly enough horses to beat that team. And I don't know.
Texas got a lot of horses, man. Texas has some really good players.
They do. They have a really good. So does Oregon, bud. Like, if you actually, I don't know if you did read the column that I wrote.
I did. I read it.
Did you read the Oregon one today yet?
I did. Yes.
Dan Lanning, in a veiled response, said we don't have as many good players as them.
Yeah, it was the much more diplomatic version of the Shane Beamer against Georgia. Did you see how many 5 stars they have on their defensive line from a few years ago?
And that's coming from somebody who arguably
has those players. Yeah,
has the closest roster in college football to matching them. And Texas is in that conversation. But if you would have asked me just player for player, which team had the most good players on it before the playoff, I would have said Ohio State. You know that about me.
Yeah.
They weren't playing well, but
I think almost anybody would have said that. I mean, if we're going player for player. Yeah.
And like Texas has very big deficiencies right now. And I don't know if a deficiency-laden team can beat that. Now, if Michigan,
but we
Ohio
also
State
don't
shows
know that
up,
we're
then
going to
maybe.
get that game in and game out, because the difference, as you obliquely pointed out, between this Ohio State team and 19 LSU and 20 Alabama,
They have lost.
They've lost. We've seen when they weren't at their best and they could not get it done.
And in the Oregon loss, funny enough, I think you could make the case that that was their second best performance of the season.
Correct. But before the playoff began, the two playoff games were obviously the best.
Right. But going into the playoff, if you would have said, Ari, what was Ohio State's best game this year in terms of performance, I would have said the loss at Oregon.
Yeah.
So, but I do think too that we're probably arrived at the 4 teams that have the fewest deficiencies. And then at the same time, I also feel like all 3 of the other non-Ohio State teams have the same one.
Is it the same one? Well, okay. No, because I think Texas's offense has more weapons than either Penn State's or Notre Dame's. I like all of their defenses about pretty well.
All their defenses are good.
I lost a little bit of faith in the Texas defense late against Arizona State, but I blamed a little bit of that on the Texas offense not keeping Arizona State's offense off the field.
That was also a little bit of a mudslide. It kind of just felt like everything was going wrong for them. That happens sometimes. Right. Like, I don't know
and
if that
Cam
was
Scatterbo is a wizard. That's that too.
Yeah.
But no, I do think like Ohio State has the most explosive offense left in this thing. It's not close. The thing about it is the other 3 teams, they're going to play one of them for sure, and then they'll play one of the other 2. The other 3 teams have defenses that can absolutely shut you down. Now, we've seen Penn State's defense against Ohio State. It, in fact, is pretty much the only thing that scored against Ohio State.
Mm-hmm.
So we know what Penn State's D against Ohio State looks like.
We do, but we thought we knew what Oregon's did too. Like, I think
we did.
This is a completely different team. Like like I feel like they found themselves.
I would agree with that. I don't think you're wrong there.
And if they lose that, then it's just like, what the hell? Like,
it'll be frustrating, but it's possible when you're playing against good teams, because I wrote about, it actually probably is up on On3 right now. I wrote about Marcus Freeman tonight because the punt situation where he runs the punt team out, runs them off, runs the offense on the field. Now they were never going to snap the ball and just run a play unless Georgia jumped. Coogan, you could see, was looking, and as soon as they jumped, he snapped, because then it was a free play. It was perfectly executed. Notre Dame really had nothing to lose. They were trying to make Georgia burn a timeout. It ended up allowing them to keep the ball and ice the game. You had the Riley Leonard dive over for the first down on the next first down, and then they just 8 clock and the game was over. But I'm thinking it's Marcus Freeman. Notre Dame's got its back to the goal line. One sideline is going crazy. Where have I seen this before? Well, I saw it at Notre Dame Stadium last year, except the sideline that was going crazy was Notre Dame's. Notre Dame's back's to the goal line. Ohio State has the ball. The clock is ticking. They have 10 men on the field, Notre Dame does. And Marcus Freeman knows this. It has come through his headset. He knows this. He has no timeouts. He has no way of telling the players how to stop the clock. And I remember sitting in his office 2 days later, and he goes, here's how we'll do this if that ever happens again. I will have a signal to one of my corners on my sideline to touch the receiver on the other side of the line of scrimmage, and they will blow the whistle and throw a flag, and that will stop the clock.
I haven't even read your column yet. And like when you were going through what they did there, the first thing I thought about was the 10 men on the field situation.
Mm-hmm.
And like how, and I think there's probably lessons to be learned, like with Dan Lanning.
Marcus Freeman was in his 19th game as a head coach when that happened. Very young in his development as a head coach. Tonight, he had a play, and like I mentioned earlier, Riley Leonard said that this is something that Marcus Freeman essentially cooked up 2 days ago. It was something they practiced all year, but then Marcus Freeman put a twist on it 2 days ago in practice, and that's what they ran today. And it was executed as well as you could possibly execute it.
In terms of just like command,
yes.
and growth.
And he had one of the best coaches in the world in a blender on the other sideline. Like Kirby Smart is considered generally the best coach in the sport. And Marcus Freeman outcoached him today. Like that is a massive step forward.
It's amazing. It's amazing. I cannot believe it.
It's fun when the thing you didn't necessarily think, and it's funny because you said this was going to happen. You picked this to happen. But I think deep down in your mind, you're like, well, but it's Georgia. But it's Georgia. But it's Georgia.
Like, that is it. That's the whole thing. Because in my mind, I did have that thought, right? I did have that thought. But I think that, and let me ask you, because like, you know, you did pick Georgia to win the national title this year. And my theory is if you were to pick Georgia to win the national title, or if you were to pick Georgia to advance very far in this tournament or be on the verge of doing that, that you have a subconscious inability to let go of what they were because of the players that are on their team, and instead of taking them for their word of who they are. Like, because if you did watch them this year, and going all the way back to when you and I shared that cute little Airbnb in Wisconsin when they almost lost
we're watching the Kentucky game, yeah.
Georgia has revealed itself multiple times this year. And I'm not saying teams can't have a bad game.
But the thing is, we've seen Ohio State allegedly reveal itself against Michigan, and that's not them.
That's why neither of us picked them to beat Oregon, Andy.
Yeah, and we're wrong.
So and sometimes, like, and if Georgia would have won today, then we would have just been wrong. But the reason why I picked Notre Dame is A, I was high on them from the beginning of the year, but B, I think it's time we start trusting teams when they tell us who they are. And what Ohio State is doing is,
and I don't want to be the commenter, but they did lose to Northern Illinois. Like, that is something this team is capable of.
Yeah.
And that's also in the back of my mind. And that is the issue.
But Notre Dame has been running through people for
they have. They have. Like, and the thing is, like, the Army and the Navy games, we can say, oh, they were overmatched. But Army and Navy have been really good against everybody else. Like,
yeah.
And Notre Dame destroyed them.
And I think that, like, you could, like, if Georgia just played that Kentucky game close and lost to Alabama with all we know about Alabama, like, I don't even think that I would have held that accountable. But, like, I also think that Georgia revealed itself in wins this year. You know what I mean? Like, we were watching the SEC
Florida
championship
game. I think the Florida game,
I think
a pretty evident one.
The
Yeah.
second Texas game that they won, like, I don't know that they played particularly well. I think that after that game, we both looked at each other and were like, hey, I don't think either of these teams are going to do it this year. Like, I think that and then listen, Carson Beck did not play. Okay. And we can't quantify.
I really don't think that would have changed this result.
But we have to acknowledge it.
Yeah.
But, like, did anything that Georgia struggled with offensively today catch you as a surprise, or is that just more of what we've seen this year?
No, it wasn't a surprise. I did, I was very impressed with Notre Dame's depth because I thought losing Riley Mills would be a problem and that Georgia would be able to generate more of a push up front, but they couldn't. And really, the only successful rushing attack at all for either team was Riley Leonard. That's it.
And didn't we talk about that on the Prize Picks video?
We did. He went more than, by the way, on his rushing number.
What did he finish with?
80, I believe.
His Prize Picks number was 43, wasn't it?
46.5.
Oh, it was? Yeah. Yep. Yoshi just said, I owe you an apology for calling you stupid, Ari. I am sorry. It's okay.
Don't worry. You'll call him stupid again later. It'll happen.
Listen, if it's not you,
Ari,
it's
I
someone
want to ask you a question that Jeff asked in the chat.
Okay.
Because I'm fascinated by this. This is a little off the playoff track, but I think you're going to like this one too. Andy, you mentioned Brian Kelly when you went live earlier. Does Marcus Freeman's success this season put any more pressure on Brian Kelly at LSU? Yeah. I'll say it does. Because when Brian Kelly went to LSU, he made reference to, I'm now at a place where I have what I need to win the national title. Whereas Marcus Freeman has shown Brian Kelly was already at a place where they give you the resources to win the national title. It's just Marcus Freeman employs them better.
It's so convoluted because, like, also too, the game has changed. Like when he left, it wasn't like
right. And Notre Dame, there was no guarantee that Notre Dame would be as in on NIL as it has been, because it had been fairly conservative about almost everything. And the idea of them being, I don't know if they're cutting edge, but they're certainly very willing to participate in that game, even though they can't really deal with most of the transfers. They're taking grad transfers from Wake Forest and grad transfers from Duke, but they've figured out a way to do this.
Yeah. And maybe
and from Clemson, I guess, Bo Collins.
For 15 years, there was only one way to do this. And now there's multiple ways to do it. Right.
Yep.
Like, I mean, it used to be top 5 class, 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 5 years in a row.
But Marcus Freeman's actually pretty good at doing that part of it too.
He's doing great. And then on top of it, like, go get Riley Leonard. And you know what I loved about the game more than anything, we mentioned the rushing stuff. It's like, in the time that we watched him play at Duke, before Duke was or there was a playoff system that would have included Duke, and we just watched it because we were sick. Riley Leonard was an amazing rushing threat. And I know that he has flashed that at times at Notre Dame, but for the most part, considering his health, they haven't really ran him all that hard. And then when they get into a game against a team like Georgia, they run the guy like a madman. And it's like, you love that. Like, it's like, we're here. We're ready to play. We're going to give you, it's like that water boy thing. Last game of the year. Can't hold anything back now.
Also,
like, they did it.
Also, remember, Will Howard's best game on the ground came against Penn State. Like, that's probably how you beat Penn State too. And that's who the Notre Dame plays next.
Yeah. And have you seen the look ahead line yet? It's been a very hectic day for me. So
Notre Dame by 1.5, I believe. Yeah.
I mean, I think there's a little of this too. You know, we did the Georgia Notre Dame like Spider-Man. Like, I think there's a little of that in that game too.
Oh, there's definitely, because Penn State's issues offensively are similar to Georgia's issues offensively. There's not a lot of, although I will say, Penn State probably has better running backs than Georgia, and Penn State definitely has a better X factor than Georgia, because Tyler Warren is different than anything Georgia has.
Tyler Warren is also such a Georgia type player too. Like, if Tyler Warren was on Georgia's team, it would be like, A, I think Georgia would have probably won today, and B, I think that they would have figured out a way to get him the ball in the most amazing ways. But like, yeah, he's unbelievable. Like, the catches that Tyler Warren makes are freaky. Like, he's so
he
good.
made an alien catch against Boise State. One of those that he's one of the only humans in the country that could make that catch for a touchdown.
Yeah.
So
Andy, we got a comment that somebody paid for. I don't want to let it go.
Oh,
Did you see this? I'll let you answer it, but they paid, and it's only
Starch Manning. I like the name. Texas ran the ball against Clemson, Michigan, A&M, not all against Georgia or Arizona State. Can they run on Ohio State? The D-line could get after Howard. I think that's the biggest question. Like, and we talked about this, I think, this morning on the show. The Texas offensive line performance against Michigan, against one of the best defensive lines in the country. We were so impressed. I loved watching it, because it wasn't even just the protection that they gave Quinn Ewers in that game. They got after Kenneth Grant, Mason Graham, they got after an elite defensive line and ran on them. And then they struggled to run on Arizona State, which was baffling to me. Like, that did not make sense. So yes, how they perform in the run game against Ohio State is going to tell us almost everything. Jason, only 6 days rest for Notre Dame and 8 for Penn State. Notre Dame is Walking Dead goers.
I was going to ask you this,
Andy.
Andy.
Making a little much of that.
Let me ask you though: do you think that there's any chance that they're going to screw up our weekend
and move that game? Maybe, but I doubt it. I don't think they. I mean, I have my theory that this Sugar Bowl kicked off when it did because they couldn't move the kickoff time of the Gator Bowl. So
Gator Bowl.
So I don't think I don't think they're going to change it. I think there's too much already planned. And I think 6 days, you're okay. Like 6 versus 8, it's worse, I think, when you have, an NFL team that I don't think they do this in the NFL where they have a team that didn't play Sunday on a Thursday night against a team that did play Sunday, but that would be cruel. That would be just wrong.
Oh, River just told me. River just sent us a message that the Orange Bowl will be played on January 9th as planned. A college football playoff spokesperson confirmed to Blue and White Illustrated on Thursday. We will not be moving the game. And they put that out through an email. So you're right. They won't be moving it.
I don't think that's like Notre Dame's not going to make that an excuse out of that. And I don't think it needs to be an excuse. I think they'll be just fine.
It becomes one if they lose.
Sure.
Because but oh boy.
Well, the plot thickens. This is going to be a lot of fun, Ari. These matchups, I thought Georgia Notre Dame was kind of a Spider-Man meme game, but Penn State Notre Dame feels like just as much of a Spider-Man meme game. And then Texas feels like kind of the last hope. If Ohio State is this buzzsaw that we think it is, Texas feels like the last hope, because if Texas plays the best game Texas can possibly play, it has the talent to compete with the buzzsaw.
My wife texted me today while I was at the airport saying she wanted to go to the game because she was watching all the games on TV. And I think she got into the pageantry a little bit and knows that half of her friends are Texas people. And we looked at the Game Time app today. And I think the cheapest tickets in the upper deck are like $600 for that. So Texas is going to be well represented in that stadium. I mean, the fact that they're playing in their home state is going to be a big deal for them, I think.
I do too. And that's another, well, we can get into the process a little more too, because I think that one of the things that I keep getting tweeted at me and I think it's interesting, though I don't know that it's something that needs to be changed or fixed. I said the seating needs to be fixed anyway, but the teams with buys went 0-4. Now, I think because the tournament was deliberately misseeded, in 2 of those games, one team that had to play last week was immensely more talented. But in the 2 games that we thought were close, that Vegas had as a less than 3-point spread or less than 4-point spread, the team that played last week won and looked sharper and jumped all over the team that didn't play last week.
Are you buying into the rusty thing?
I'm not really, because of the other 2. Because of the 2 where the one team was just more talented. Like if it had been seeded straight and that same thing had happened, maybe I'd feel differently. But I feel like because of the deliberate misseeding, because 2 of those games were set up the way they were, I don't know that we can take much from it. It's a fairly small sample size.
Hey, I got to wrap this around back to the game that we started in, though.
Sure.
And just ask you, what was your impression of Gunnar Stockton, and do you feel like Georgia can go into next season with him as their guy?
I thought he looked pretty good once they cut him loose. I think whether it was anybody, like even if Carson Beck had come back for another year, they need more playmakers. Like they need people who can catch the ball. The drops plagued them all season. They need people who are dynamic, who can get open. That's really all there is to it.
Mm-hmm.
They have to get better at receiver. If they can get a dynamic tight end, a la Brock Bowers, I mean that Brock Bowers is kind of a unicorn, but they need more dynamic playmakers. That was their problem for all of the year.
With you.
And I think Gunnar Stockton's probably fine if they have that.
Fravel edits. Notre Dame is back. Tell the world we are back. Notre Dame versus Ohio State. Natty, book it. Thanks, Ari, for believing we are SEC champs, and it just means more to us.
I think the SEC would be happy to take Notre Dame if Notre Dame actually wanted to try to win SEC championships. I think I think that's one phone call that would make something happen really quickly.
I think Notre Dame could get just about anybody to pick up the phone in that regard.
Yeah. Notre Dame Ohio State is a ratings bonanza as a national title game for one, but also we started out talking about that crazy game last year in Notre Dame Stadium, and what a full circle moment that would be for Marcus Freeman and Ryan Day.
Yeah, and of course Marcus Freeman would be playing against the team he played for in college, and Ryan Day would be playing a rematch with Lou Holtz. Watching it would be a real
kicking the knackers.
I'd like to know where Lou Holtz is right now.
Ohio State need his opinion on this for sure. Even or Ty Schmidt, Pat McAfee's sidekick, who does Lou Holtz impression. We need something like that. We need some sort of breakdown by Lou Holtz.
Has Lou Holtz talked to anybody about that?
He has. I think he laughed.
Oh, he has, because I haven't seen it. It would be funny to have him on the show if that.
I think he talked to Ty Schmidt in the Ty Schmidt makeup or in the Lou Holtz makeup about it. So,
because I actually haven't heard of or heard from or seen Lou Holtz since Ryan Day asked. I'd like to know where. Legitimately would like to know where he is.
Well, I'm sure if the matchup is set, if Notre Dame's in the national title game, somebody's going to chat with him. So
gotta have him on the show.
Yeah, absolutely.
I know that we're probably winding this down here pretty soon, but the Mississippi Rebels are beating Duke 24-7 at halftime of the Gator Bowl. Andy, did you or do you want to have the SEC conversation?
This is not where I thought you were going with that.
Where'd you think I was going?
I thought you were just going to ask me, did the committee mess up by leaving Ole Miss out?
No. I mean, I kind of did. It was just a different way.
We can have the SEC conversation all you want. I don't feel like I've been one of those people that says that has said put the SEC teams in. Alabama should have gotten in. What did I say about Alabama before they played in their bowl game? If you'd have sent them to Penn State instead of SMU, the same thing might have happened to Alabama that happened to SMU.
When I say the SMU discussion, I'm not pointing my finger at you and going, ha. That's not what I was implying. I just meant it is pretty remarkable that the entire conference blew up in the postseason. Whether it be the playoff outside of Texas,
there's still
everything.
An SEC team in it. They're new, but they're still in it.
I know, but you know what I mean. It's the whole narrative.
No,
is just
I think the SEC folks, the people in the conference office, probably thought this was a chance to have 3 of the 4 teams in the semis, and that's how this would look every year. But it's not. It may be how it looks in a future year, but it is not now.
You know what?
The SEC champion just lost to Notre Dame, fair and square, in the Sugar Bowl. And Notre Dame was the better team.
You want to know the funniest thing about the way that this played out, though, is that Penn State is everything that the SEC people wanted Ole Miss or Tennessee or South Carolina or Alabama to be. The 3rd or 4th best team in a conference who actually was good enough to win games and get to the end.
Yep. And the thing is, the Big Ten has more money than the SEC. In this era of college football, they're going to put together, at least at the top, a competitive depth that allows them to have teams that are the 3rd or 4th best team that make the Final Four, that compete for national titles. That's going to happen. That's real. It's not. The SEC is going to have the most players drafted again. I'm not sure that that streak is going to stay alive through this era either.
Is that a fact?
Is it a fact that the SEC will have? They probably will this year.
Okay.
But what I'm saying is I think that streak's in danger coming up.
I don't know if that's a fact.
You don't think they'll have the most players drafted this year?
I think they could. I don't think that's saying that they will.
Yeah, we'll find out. I bet it's close.
Yeah.
If it doesn't end this year, it's going to end in the next couple because the Big Ten is just. Now the Big Ten has 18 teams, so we're going to have to do it, per team.
Oh, we're going to have to
whatever.
We're going to have to count it up on a curve, but
But the per capita the Big Ten could have the higher per capita here in the next few years.
There's going to be a few teams in the Big Ten that have 0 drafted, so it shouldn't take into account much. But
we'll find
Andy,
out.
we have some payers here, and I want to make sure we service the people.
Let's make sure they get.
So this one was a big one here. Saying Ohio State is 19 LSU. This is Brian Laguerre.
Mm-hmm.
Saying OSU is 19 LSU is one of the most delusional takes I've ever heard. They lost 2 games, one to a team with no offense in a year with no elite teams in 19. What are we doing? I never said that they were 2019 LSU. I said their performance and who they and how they played
looks like
playing currently
19 LSU
looks like 19
postseason.
LSU in the postseason. I don't think that this year's Ohio State team stacks up in terms of totality of accomplishment with that.
That team was better. And that team in this year would have, like, if you had that team with those players in this season, if you win the SEC championship, how many, like, what your record 16-0 if you win the national title?
Yeah, I think so.
It would have been 16-0.
Yeah. This one here from Karen Golding. It is not fair to say Penn State's offense is much better than Georgia's.
I didn't say it was much better than Georgia's. I said they had a better X factor, which they do. Georgia doesn't have a Tyler Warren.
No, she's saying
neither of them have any receivers that scare you.
She said, "Is it not fair to say Penn?" So it is. It's just what she's.
It's not much better than Georgia's. It is slightly better, but not a ton better. Because again, like Georgia, they don't have receivers that scare you. They have the Tyler Warren that scares you, and 2 running backs that scare you more than Georgia's a little bit.
And their quarterback is better. Let's call it what it is. Right?
I think so.
Yeah. And that's a big deal. And if Drew Aller plays well, I mean, I thought he had a few throws in that game the other night that was like, whoa, Nelly. But, so Carson Beck does that too, or has done that, and he didn't play.
Yeah,
so, I don't
Carson Beck has had those games too. So, yeah, I don't think they're much better than Georgia, but I think they're probably slightly better than Georgia.
Yeah.
No, I think Tyler Warren is the difference.
And this feeds really well into Corey here. Penn State, Notre Dame is such a good matchup, it's hard to call. I'd go within the better QB and running game, Penn State by 4. So
does Penn State have a better running game than Notre Dame? Are we sure?
I don't think that's a fact.
Yeah, I don't know if we're sure about that. Jeremiah Love got hurt in this game. Jadarian Price is interesting. He only averaged 3.7 yards a carry. I think he had 10 carries for 37 yards. But it feels like he had all his yards on like 3 carries after Jeremiah Love got hurt.
Yeah.
But I think I'm hoping Jeremiah Love can be back and healthy enough for this game. Because he's been dealing with an illness too.
Abdul Carter and his status is a pretty big deal.
Right.
And he posted something on Twitter that was sci-fi, and I don't understand it, so I texted it to the group, and I want you to tell me what that is and explain to me what that could mean.
Is it sci-fi or is it anime? Because the kids love the anime.
No, I think it's something from a comic book movie.
I don't. Oh, I see. Okay, it's Bane. It looks like he's Bane. Oh, this is Bane.
Oh, it's Bane?
I believe it's Bane.
It will be very painful for you.
Yes. You adopted the darkness. I was born into it, brother.
Does that mean he's good? Does that mean he's going to play?
It means I wouldn't want to be Riley Leonard. No. Because I just got banged up running for 80 yards. That when he went flying for that first down, the sequence right after the hard count thing, I was like, man, he's gonna feel that in the morning, but he ain't gonna feel that tonight.
Well, we're going into a weekend without football, Andy, which is pretty sad. I guess we have some. We have some NFL, but
we have some fairly meaningless NFL games. Hey, let's not forget the Duke's Mayo Bowl is still coming up. That's tomorrow.
Okay, well, we'll have to watch that. It'll be
either PJ Fleck or Brent Pry is going to get mayo dumped on his head.
My daughter doesn't have day school tomorrow, so I might try to be a good dad for a day, and then we're going to get right back into football.
And watch the Duke's Mayo Bowl with her? That would be the greatest thing you could do as a dad.
She was watching the Rose Bowl and seemed to be moderately into it, so we're working on it. But we have some stuff we're working on. We're going to be...
Oh, it's the Star Wars back to tank. Oh, that's what it is.
What's a back to tank?
It's a tank where you sit in it and it rejuvenates you and fixes you. That's Vader goes into the chamber to speed his recovery before he gets back into his mechanized suit.
Electric.
It's bad that I missed that. My brother-in-law is going to kill me. He builds custom Star Wars suits. Like, he can build you a bike trooper suit if you ask him. So I'm highly embarrassed to have missed that, because it did kind of look like Bane at first. But yeah. All right.
Was
so
a bike trooper? Is it one of those guys that wear the white plastic?
Well, that's all stormtroopers wear those. Bike troopers are the ones that ride the speeder bikes, like on the Forest Moon of Endor and Return of the Jedi. They're kind of scouting around on the little speeder bikes, but they wear a different uniform than the standard stormtrooper.
That's good to know.
Different helmet. Oh, we're showing the back to tank. There it is. Well, now I have questions for Abdul Carter. I have Star Wars related questions for him. Different generation, like which trilogy is he the biggest fan of? Like which one matters the most to him?
That looks like
these are the important questions.
That looks like something from the Saw movies.
I think that's what they're going for. Guys, this has been fun. This has been fun. I cannot wait for these two games next week. I don't know what's going to happen, and I'm glad I don't know. You know, Ari's convinced that Ohio State has found its other gear. It's never going back. I think I probably need to see them do that to Texas before I do that, but I'm picking them. Spoiler alert, I'm picking Ohio State. I'm done picking against them. I'm still not sure who I'm going to pick in Notre Dame, Penn State. We're going to have to figure that out.
They're going to win the national title, Andy.
Clip it, River. Clip that. Because we don't know. We don't know. We don't know anything. That's what we've learned in this tournament so far. We don't know anything, and it's beautiful. We'll talk to you guys on Monday morning.